So today I want to talk about the reality of the sin of slavery, the church, and reparation. I know it's a difficult dialogue, and it's a difficult conversation, but we have to have it. That in this time we're talking about racial injustice, police brutality, and the justness of protests across the world for Black Lives Matter. I want to integrate this within the context of reparations and the need for the atonement by the church for the sin of slavery. You see, the church can't point outward without first pointing and looking inward on its collective culpability historically regarding slavery. So today I want to talk about the fact that when Jesus established his church, the Church of the Living God, there was no black church or white church. There was the church. He said, upon this rock, the truth that I am the Christ, the church shall be established, and the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. So Jesus was not about racial division. Now, over time, the church essentially almost blessed and endorsed the system of slavery, starting with the exploration of Christopher Columbus coming this side of the world to conquer territory in the name of God. And in that blessing and that blanket endorsement, many millions of native peoples here and ultimately Africans would be caught in a system of oppression. I want to talk about reparation, but I want to talk about reparation not just as monetary disbursement. I want to talk about reparation as the need to repair historic injustice that occurred in the past. And I want to give the biblical perspective on reparation because I think reparation is found in the Bible. When Isaiah 58:12 says we are called to be the repairer of the breach, the restorer of dwellings that were ruined, it points to the reality there that reparation is biblical. I argue that reparation has four dimensions. The first dimension is recognition. The church has a role in acknowledging not just that slavery occurred, but that the church here in America and collectively across the world endorsed a system of slavery. And even if it didn't endorse it, it stood by silently while blacks were oppressed across the world. And so recognition is not just acknowledgement that this happened, but recognition also involves seeking to do something about the past. And so the first step to reparation is recognition. The second step towards reparation, I would argue, would be restoration. When we talk about restoration, I'm thinking of the biblical articulation that is found in Joel 2:27-32 that says, I will restore to you, or I will repay you everything that the locust and the cankerworm has stolen. Slavery was like a cankerworm, like the locust devouring the human potential and the humanity of people of African descent. The church participated in that system of slavery. The church must now go forward and lead the efforts here in the Americas and elsewhere to agitate for reparations for slavery. The third dimension I want to talk about in terms of reparation is the idea of redemption. And back to the Bible, if we think of the biblical analogy of the Levitical priests, the priest would first have to atone for their sin before they could bear the sin of the people to God for atonement. What is the point I'm making? Before the church can seek externally to criticize oppressive social and political and economic institutions, the church must look inside, do an internal assessment and say, before I go to these people to say, I want to atone for your sins, I must first atone for mine. So the church must first acknowledge, accept, and do something tangibly about its legacy of racial oppression and the endorsement of a system of slavery. Then and only then can we ultimately go to oppressive social institutions and require them to render justice. And fourth and final, I want to talk about the reality of reconciliation. Until we do recognition, restoration, and redemption, we cannot talk about reconciliation. Reconciliation has to be the end, not the beginning of reparation. Why? Because by the time we get to reconciliation, we would have acknowledged that we did a wrong. We'd have sought to do something to atone for this wrong and to restore the humanity and dignity of the wronged party. And Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 5:18 that because we have been reconciled to God through Jesus, we as Christians have the ministry of reconciliation. So we have an opportunity and we have a ministry as children of God to reconcile people who are aggrieved and people who are divided so that they can now live together in peace. But the slogan of Black Power of the 1960s resonates in my head: no justice, no peace. We first have to have justice before we can talk about this idea of peace. And so next time, I want to do the second part, which deals with how do we tangibly do reconciliation. So God bless you. Until next time, continue to advocate for justice, because if you love God, then you must love justice. And Isaiah 61:8 says, I, God, love justice. God bless you. See you next time.